Hello everybody, welcome to my channel. I'm Trace Perot. This is 20 at 70. Today's date is 25th of February. This is video number 12, or I should say subject number 12. What's the difference? And the main body of this video is about how and why I maintain a low-fat raw vegan diet, aka 80-10-10. My background is that I have been a raw vegan for 30 years, and I was a vegetarian for about a year and a half prior to that. First 15 years as a raw vegan was a high-fat, also known as gourmet raw vegan. Then I discovered 80-10-10, so the last 15 years I've been strictly 80-10-10, which is a fruit-based 80% fruit diet and 10% protein and 10% fat from plant sources. So the first thing that I usually do in a video, I've been calling it a recap, but really it's just an add-on or corrections for the previous video. So if you saw the last, I'll be doing an add-on or a correction part in every video I start. So it always refers to the previous video, which in this case was number 11. And actually this covers a little bit of what I said in number 10, and it was about the white blood cell count. So what I said was, it was about watching, let's get rid of the pen. It was about watching the Doug Graham video, his interview with CJ, Chef CJ, where he gets into the fact that cooked food heightens the white blood cell count. To the level of what the main function of the white blood cell count is, which is to deal with infection and foreign invaders in the body. So, and the idea is that cooked food, every time you eat cooked food, your white blood cell count is elevated to like 13 to 18 million, and its normal population is about 3 million. Sorry, my voice is a little rough because I just got through singing 3 days in a row, and so it's cracking a little bit. Anyways, so yeah, the cooked food, every time you eat cooked food, it elevates your white blood count, 13 to 18 million, right? So if you're doing that 3 times a day, every day, or even twice a day, you're eating cooked food, that's what you're doing in your body. This is abnormal, but it's considered to be normal because everybody eats cooked food, right? So, and what I did was I said that Doug doesn't really go into the explanation of what that actually does, if that does any damage to your body. But actually I looked over the video, and he does make one comment, and that is that white blood cells are not, apparently they don't increase in your body, they only decrease. So every time you have to elevate your white blood cell count, it takes away from your white blood cell reserves. So basically what happens is over time, apparently you're losing your white blood cell capacity, right? So that is the problem with this. That's one of the problems with the whole white blood cell elevation thing regarding cooked food. So, I just wanted to make that correction. There's got to be other consequences as well. I mean, I'm thinking, considering the effect that cooked food has on you, it kind of drains your energy, it kind of drains your vitality. The diminishing of white blood cell count in your body may be contributing to aging. So that's something that nobody's looked into. So one of these days, maybe these researchers, when raw veganism becomes a lot more popular and people are taking a closer look at it, there's going to be a lot more research done on it. So right now it's very, very limited research, very limited, if any at all. So anyway, so I wanted to make that correction. So the second thing I do after the corrections is I talk about what I learned about food this week, because I'm always trying to learn about food. Okay. So I saw a video. I watched a video that I'd never seen before. That's a really popular vegan video. It's called Forks Over Knives. Okay. And it explores the diet, standard American diet, and its effects, and how veganism is much better for you, and how the American corporations have sort of taken over the food industry and are basically dictating what people eat and this kind of thing. So anyways, there was something which I found very interesting, which I wasn't quite aware of. Now, when I in the 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever, the first 30 or 40 years of my life, it was very unusual to encounter somebody who was obese. Yeah, you had people that were, maybe slightly overweight or a little plump or whatever, but even they were rare. I mean, it was abnormal to be overweight, okay? Especially, grossly overweight. Obviously now that has changed tremendously. I mean, you go to the market or you go out to an event or something, and it's looking like 50 to 60 people are overweight, and probably, who knows, 40% of those people are grossly overweight. So overweight, has come on as this huge problem, right? And if you're only 30 or 40 years old today, that's kind of normal for you, okay? It's normal to see so many people overweight, all right? But when I grew up, when I was in my 20s and 30s, it was not normal. So now, if you're 30 or 40 years old, you don't really know the difference. You think, well, human beings are they're overweight, A few of them are skinny and thin, and usually they're people that exercise or whatever, but who knows what causes you to be thin. But most people are overweight, and it's accepted to be normal. So anyways, in Forks Over Knives, they go into it a little bit of just exactly why that is. Now, I have always thought that was overeating or eating disorder. It was an eating disorder that people got primarily because of probably childhood abuse. I certainly ran across a lot of cases of that where people developed eating disorders because they'd been abused as children. So I was I've always thought, now that so many people are overweight, I've always thought, well, there can't be that much child abuse going on that all these people are overweight. So sure enough, there's another reason for it, and that is this whole idea of empty calories. So what's happening is, first of all, corn syrup was invented, right? And if you want to, you should check out this movie, Forks Over Knives. It's pretty informative. So anyways, corn syrup was invented, I think, in like the 1970s. It's a very cheap sweetener. It could be put in anything. The corn crops were subsidized by the government. And then as we got more and more into processed food, we took out the fiber, we took out the nutrients, and we loaded them up with fat and sweeteners like corn syrup. And what this does is, if you eat a plant-based meal, your stomach tends to operate more in line with the way it should be operating, and your stomach has sensors that sense when you're full and when you're satisfied and when your stomach is stretched to the max. So there are innate mechanisms that tell you that you're satisfied, that you're full, and that you don't want to eat anymore. Okay, so it takes about twice as much processed food, fast food, food with corn syrup in it, food that has been denatured, devitalized. The fiber and the nutrients have been taken out of it for the most part. It takes about twice as much of that food to fill up your stomach, okay? But you're still getting the same amount of calories, okay? So you're loading yourself up with this garbage food, and you're eating twice as much of it because your sensory system in your stomach is not registering satisfaction. It's not registering the stretch of your stomach lining. So, and then in Forks and Knives, they show examples. People are eating these super big, huge things of Coca-Cola and all this French fries and, double and triple cheeseburgers and all this stuff. Well, that's what's going on, So I thought that was very interesting. It's not something that if you're a vegetarian or a vegan, a healthy one, or a, raw vegan, that you really have to worry about. But it's good to know these things, because when you're out in the world and you see what's going on, it's nice to have the reason, to know the reason why these things are occurring. So I thought I would bring that up. Once again, that's Forks Over Knives. It's on YouTube. It's free. You can watch it. Also, the other thing about that was that with the corn syrup and the denaturing of the food, it makes food, that type of food, into really an addictive substance. And very early on, when I became a vegan, I ran across somebody in the plant-based world saying that you really have to consider food to be heroin. All right, and that stuck with me because it's kind of a antithetical metaphor. You don't think of food as something that's addictive like heroin, but really food is heroin. I mean, it sedates you, okay? Especially, I'm not talking about the food that I eat or that a normal, healthy vegan or vegetarian eats, but I'm talking about the standard American diet. The effects of that food, actually, if you've ever known a heroin addict or seen them or seen a video of a heroin addict, the effects of this terrible food that people are eating, this SAD stuff, are far worse than the effects that heroin has on somebody, right? I mean, heroin addicts are usually thin. They may not be healthy, right? But they're thin. And, weakened heroin addicts can maintain their employment. They can maintain their relationships. They can do all these things, right? And, generally speaking, they're probably living a lot longer than all these obese people running around. So, the effects of being obese and eating this terrible food are just as bad as being a heroin addict, or even worse. So, and I try to keep that in the forefront, or I did when I was a vegetarian and initially a vegan, because it's very easy to overconsume cooked food, And as Forks Over Knives says, this kind of eating, this kind of SAD eating, is basically a low-grade addiction, all right? So you're looking at a bunch of people, when you go out in public, who have an addiction, and it's not a positive addiction. I'm all for positive addictions. I've got several myself. It's a negative addiction. So I thought that was very interesting. So I'm going to go. I want to go. Sorry, that's my speaker. I wanted to go into one other thing that I learned about food today. So I'm going to refer to another video, and this is a video with the UK Fruit Fest interviews that this presenter, Ronnie, who organizes the UK Fruit Fest, does on a regular basis. He interviews people who are into eating a lot of fruit, who are raw vegans or semi-raw vegans. He interviews them and sort of delves into their lifestyle and how they got into it and all that stuff. So anyways, I came across this video where he interviews this guy, Don Bennett, guy who's been 48 years he's been a vegan, right? And he's very much into research. He's not like, he doesn't have an official capacity as a researcher. And he's not a doctor or anything, but he's done a heck of a lot of research about food, right? And he brought up some really controversial stuff that I am going to seek out a verification on. I'm going to further look into this because there were like 3 or 4 things he brought up. First of all, he discusses, the omega-3, omega-6 balance, right? And he's saying that whole foods, whole, organic, fresh, ripe, raw foods basically have a omega-3 to omega-6 balance of 1-to-1, a ratio of 1-to-1. Okay, that's what he's saying. And then he makes the statement that avocados, right, that he found out that avocados have an omega-3 to omega-6 balance or ratio of 1-to-17. So you're getting 17 times the omega-6s as 3s. Now, of course, it's extremely unhealthy to be consuming something that has a ratio, omega-3 omega-6 ratio of 1-to-17. I mean, omega-6s are responsible for inflation in your body, so you're inducing hyperinflation when you take this ratio out of balance. And so I was really surprised about that. I mean, I really have not eaten a lot of avocados since I've been on 80-10-10 because they're very high in fat. But lately I have actually been making a lot of salad dressing out of avocados, and so I was I was really surprised to hear this. And now I'm considering that maybe avocados are not very good for you. And I have heard that, but I never heard an explanation like this one that he is offering. The other thing he was saying was that his basic premise is that he never got any information about being raw. He came to this conclusion based on logic. And his logic was that 100,000 years ago, what were people doing? What were they eating, right? Because we have, this brings up another point, because we haven't evolved. We may not be wandering around in the forest anymore. Instead we're driving BMWs and we're living in condos or whatever, right? And we're using high-tech equipment and we have sophisticated relationships going on. And so, but that does not mean that physically we have evolved to a point where we're able and where we thrive on eating food that we were eating, that we weren't eating 100,000 years ago before the hunter-gatherer cultures developed, right? Before that, we were foragers, right? And that's how we evolved. And that's what we're designed to eat. We're designed to eat things that are foraged, right? And for some reason we broke the sacred edict and we got into doing cooked food and eating animals and all that kind of stuff. But still, our bodies have not evolved into being tolerant of that. Really, if anything, they've devolved. And you'll find evidence of that in that great book called Left in the Dark, where the author basically proves that our hormonal levels have been all tweaked and everything, and our left and right brain functions have been imbalanced, right? Whereas previously, when we were getting the proper diet, everything was in balance. So, so that is Don Bennett's premise, right? So he thought, well, 100,000 years ago, we didn't have fire and we were foraging, so I should be eating everything raw, right? So that's how he got into raw food. At that time, 48 years ago, there was very little information about raw food. Even when I started, there was very little. It was just at the beginning of the gourmet raw revolution that I started being raw vegan. So there wasn't a lot of research or information out there. And what there was not really that accurate. You had people like David Wolf and Gabriel Cousins and stuff like that who were promoting the raw food diet, but they didn't have a clue about the 80%, the 10% fat. So it was all over the map. I mean, and that's basically why it fell apart. That gourmet raw thing fell apart. The other thing that Don Bennett talks about, I'm sorry I'm taking so long on these things and not the main subject, but this is important stuff, is the fact that, 100,000 years ago, people did not make salads, right? So his premise is he doesn't eat salads, right? He mono eats everything. Now, this may very well be the very top rung, okay? This mono eating, you're not making salads with 5 or 6 different ingredients, which I do, practically every night. And it may be that we are not designed to eat that way, to combine all these different foods, even if they're low fat, raw vegan, organic. It may be that that's a slight tick or a slight error in the whole raw vegan thing, even the 80-10-10 thing. I don't know, but I think it's a premise that's worth exploring because it does make a lot of sense, right? And so as far as I'm concerned, a way to measure that is, every time I eat a big salad, I do definitely get an energy lull. So, if you think back 100,000 years ago and people are in food forests and they're foraging, could they afford to have a lower energy after eating their meals, right? In my case, I usually don't eat till later on, and sometime between 6 and 8, sometimes even as late as midnight, and that. Eating that, there's no requirements. I don't have to go out and do something after 8 o'clock, right? If I do, then I don't eat, I eat the salad later, right? I'll just keep eating fruit right up till 8 or 9 o'clock. If I have to do something, if I have to go out and play in a club till midnight or something, I'll just keep eating fruit. And then I'll have plenty of energy. I'll never have an energy lull. And then when I get home at midnight, I'll make a meal, which I have found eating late at night does not affect me negatively at all. If you are eating cooked food, that's going to have a big effect on you, and it did on me when I was eating cooked food. Eating after 8 o'clock, any kind of concentrated cooked food, definitely affected the way I felt in the morning. So those were the things that were covered in this Don Bennett UK Fruit Festival video, and I'll put a link to that particular video in the description. So, what am I going to talk about next? I have a little cheat sheet here. I was going to do a little blip about age. Let me think about that for a little bit, because I'm noticing something in the plant presenters, and that is, I've looked up their, the major ones with Barnard, McDougall, Clapper, Greger, Dr. Michael Greger, Campbell, Dr. Campbell, right? And I'm looking at them and I'm sort of assessing them, because I look at people and I try to assess their health or their age, whether or not they're aging well, right? Because I want to get an idea, of the effects of different types of food, different types of diets on people's aging. Now, if you're 30, you don't worry about aging. You worry more about performance, about getting the job done, blah, blah, blah. Well, I still worry about that like I'm 20 years old, but the whole thing about aging and mortality has sort of come into my consciousness, so I'm more aware of that. And so I'm looking at these plant-based presenters, and they're all cooked vegans, right? And I'm sort of seeing that, well, especially in the case of Dr. McDougall, all right, who is 74 years old. He's only 4 years older than I am. And man, he looks like he's got one foot in the grave. And he's the guy that promotes a starch-based diet. He's convinced himself that that human beings are made to eat starch. And if you want to see a rebuttal to that, just watch Doug Graham's video on that, where he addresses that. It's a pretty preposterous proposal, and you know, I'm looking at him and he looks like he's got one foot in the grave at 74. I mean, he looks old, right? So just based on that alone, you can sort of tell that if this guy's eating mostly starch, cooked starch, it's not doing him any service. And it kind of blows his whole theory about this whole idea that we are cooked starch eaters by nature, you know. So anyways, and if you look at some of the other people like, you know, Clapper, Dr. Clapper is 74 years old, 4 years older than me. And he looked very old. Now, I have a respect for all these people because they're taking people out of the SAD and they're putting them on a vegan diet and they're getting away from eating animal products, and it's much healthier, right? So I'm not trying to put them down because I think they're doing a great service, but I'm just looking at what the way they look and how it jives with whether or not they're eating cooked food or raw food. And Clapper looks pretty darn old, you know, for 74 years old. You know, I would mistake him for a much older man. He is full of energy, and I assume that he gets that from his food. But you never know, because people who are highly energetic and eating a lot of cooked food may be taking some kind of stimulants like caffeine or whatever. Who knows? Dr. Campbell, he's 87, so you kind of expect him to look old, you know. And he does look very old, no question about it. If I had my druthers when I turned 90 or 100, I certainly would not want to look that old. It's too stereotypical, you know. But we'll find out. And that brings up another point, and that is that if you're young, if you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s right now, you should definitely check in with those of us who are in our 60s and 70s, who are low-fat raw vegans or vegetarians, because this is the only gauge you have at the moment. There really aren't a lot of studies. So if you're curious as to what a low-fat raw vegan results in over the long term for somebody who's 70 or 80, because believe it or not, someday you will be 70 or 80, then you should definitely be watching these videos and checking in with me and other people who have that experience, because it's going to give you a lot of insight. It's going to be inspirational. You know, if you're in your 70s now and you're a low-fat raw vegan like me or Doug Graham or something, we don't really have anybody we can look to. I can't dial up somebody who's 110 years old, who's been a low-fat raw vegan for 30 years and find out where they're at. Okay, I don't have that privilege. Right, I'm on the cutting edge, so to speak. But if you're in your 20s or 30s, you've got that resource now. You can tap into these people, and I highly encourage it. Anyway, so that's that. So now I want to do the diet squeeze. So basically, you know, I'm not giving nutritional advice. I'm just saying what I do and what I kind of think other people should do if they're transitioning into a low-fat raw vegan diet. Okay. There's many opinions out there. Some people say you should fast first, like juice fast, or you know, do something like this, and to prepare your body and get rid of all the garbage. Well, I don't really think that's necessary. It may be beneficial, but I don't think you have to fast to transition into a raw food diet. You might want to do some grape fasts. I mean, I've done 4 or 5 days on water. You know, I've never done a long 27-day water fast or anything like that. But what I prefer is to fast on grapes. And I mentioned this before in a video. You know, the best fast I can come up with that's going to last 5 days is to eat a half a pound of organic grapes every 2 hours for 5 days. As far as your digestive system, it's going to clean it out. Okay, you know, it's gonna totally clean it out, and that would probably be a good way to transition into eating all raw from a cooked vegan or cooked vegetarian diet. So anyways, you I've gone through this diet squeeze. I've got, I get up, hit the citrus, sweet fruit, greens. Then I go to subacid fruit. I make the decision as to when I'm going to eat a concentrated meal later in the day. There's two options for me. The first option is, okay, if I'm going to do something that's going to take me away from a home where I can't prepare anything and I just want to have some fruit in me, then I'll cut off at 9 o'clock and I'll eat my main meal at 12 or 1 or 2 p.m., right? And then 3-4 hours after that, I'll go back to eating fruit, when I have to do something that requires a lot of energy. I take that option, or I just, keep eating fruit till 2 o'clock, cut it off, the high density sweet fruit, cut it off, go into the subacid fruit, and then eat dinner like 6, right? So those are basically my two options. Or like if I'm doing really a lot that day and I'm staying up late, I'll keep eating fruit all the way till like 11 o'clock at night, and then I'll have a meal, whatever that's going to be. So on the diet squeeze, we're kind of hovering around noontime if you're a transition person. So you've cut off the sweet fruit at 9 o'clock in the morning. You've eaten subacid fruit. You've snacked on asparagus and spinach and celery, blah, 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 and you're ready to eat your concentrated food. So here's the thing, if you're serious about becoming raw, okay, low-fat, raw, vegan, I recommend that at this point where you've mastered the art of eating nothing, eating fruit and greens up until noon, if you've mastered that, then I think it would be a great idea to reinforce this idea that you're going towards fully raw by going out to a supermarket or a farmer's market and purchasing 40 pounds of bananas in one shot, okay? So what that's going to do is, well, first of all, you're going to see how unusual it is. So you're going to learn about that, right? Because when you pull up to the cashier and you've got a market, cart full of 40-pound bananas, you're going to get some comments, right? The cashier is going to comment. The people in line are going to comment. Passerbys are going to comment, right? They're going to say, "Whoa, my God, that's a lot of bananas," right? Well, what I've learned is that to get around that, you just say, "Well, I eat a lot of smoothies. I eat smoothies every day. That's where the bananas go. I don't get into high density sweet fruit. I'm a low fat raw vegan, and and bananas are what I use to get my 2,500 calories a day, and I don't get into any of that stuff. I just say I eat smoothies, and people acknowledge that. They understand that. They don't get confused. They think, oh, this guy just eats a lot of smoothies. But anyways, I recommend you doing that. The other thing that it does, besides introducing to you this interaction with other people with regards to their reaction to what you eat, it sort of will, well, first of all, you're faced with having to deal with 40 pounds of bananas. So you take them home, you put them in the cupboards, or you put them out on the counter, right, where you can see them. And so what are you thinking at that point? You're thinking, man, I got to eat a lot of fruit this week, or these bananas are going to go bad. Now, I buy 20 pounds of yellow bananas, ripe, almost ripe, yellow bananas, and 20 pounds of bananas that are kind of a little bit green, right? But when you bring them home and you put them on your counter, you're going to go, my God, I'm diving into this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to eat these bananas. I'm going to finish them this week, and I'm going to buy another 40 pounds next week. Okay, so this is kind of a psychological way to introduce you to, the high consumption of high density fruit. And I just think it's a good idea because I do it all the time. It's fun. It's just fun. And the other thing is I like to put my fruit out on the counter, on the kitchen counter. Okay. there's something about it. Okay, it's colorful, number one. So when you look at it, it kind of lifts you. It's uplifting, right? To have all this colorful fruit sitting on your counter. And it also gives you this sense of abundance, right? You're bringing abundance into your life. You got, 5 mangoes and, 20 pounds of bananas, and you got papayas, and you got apples and whatever else there is around on your counter. Of course, I can't do that here because we have rats, all right? And they will get in. They'll chew right through the screen, and they'll take, they'll go after the fruit. So I have to put things in a fruit safe. Which is pretty common in Hawaii. As a matter of fact, I have a rat living in here right now, and, I can't seem to chase it out. I can't seem to get rid of it. I plugged up all the holes that it's chewed through the screens going back and forth. So I don't know what's going on. I guess I'll have to get one of those live traps and try to trap it and release it out far away from the house or something. In the meantime, it's my involuntary pet. So 5 o'clock in the morning when I hear things falling, I know it's the rat running from one corner to the other. So that's what I recommend on the diet squeeze. So think about that. So now I'll get into the main subject of this video, which is why I maintain this diet and how I maintain this diet, and that's 80-10-10, 80% fruit, 10% protein, 10% fat from plant-based sources. So yeah, all the usual, all the standard reasons, right? Health, okay? I never get sick. I haven't really been sick in 30 years. Okay, so if you don't want to get sick, if you don't want to get the flu, if you don't want to get the colds, if you don't want to get the allergies, if you don't want to get the infections, the sinus infections and all this other stuff, okay, low-fat, raw vegan, all right, that is the solution. And it cures, people's skin clears up, all kinds of stuff happens. Arthritis goes away. There's even a case of that Doug Graham mentions, and this has not gotten a lot of press, and it's in a very obscure place. But he, in a lecture that he's giving, he talks about this client that he had, this woman, I don't know, in her 30s or 40s, that was going fully raw and was taking his advice, and she was taking care of her mother who had severe Alzheimer's disease. Okay, and after she got versed in the 80-10 program and she went back home and she got into the routine, she decided to feed her mother the 80-10-10 diet. And the reason why she could do this is because her mother could not remember what she used to eat. Okay, that's how bad her Alzheimer's was, is that she didn't know what to eat. She had no memory of eating food, right? So this woman began feeding her the 80-10-10 diet, and the Alzheimer's disease completely cleared up. I mean, that's like revolutionary, okay? Alzheimer's disease is on dementia is on the rise. It's totally due to diet, They're trying to discover drugs that are going to correct this and all this kind of stuff. And it's a severe illness, causes people tremendous pain, suffering, not only them, but their loved ones. And, low-fat, raw, vegan diet will completely cure that. So health is a very outstanding reason why I do this, because I don't want these things in my life, okay? Ethics, okay? I cannot handle the idea that animals are, billions of animals are slaughtered on a continual basis every second of every day so that we can fill our bellies with this garbage, okay? It's this tremendous error in humanity's direction. It's just ridiculous, okay? And so I'm an ethical vegan. I don't want to see animals suffer. I firmly believe that if there were no, if everybody was vegan and there was no murdering of animals in order to eat them, that wars and conflicts would completely disappear off the face of the earth. You know, people murdering other people, people beating up other people, you know, aggression, physical aggression, all of that would disappear. So the other two things are the level of energy I can maintain, which is like off the charts. Okay, that's why I put the introduction of this video about that, the day. It's a couple of days later now, but that day, you know, that I'd gotten up at 5:30 after 4 hours of sleep and rode a bus for 3 hours and then rode my bike 30 miles and did a 5-hour rehearsal. You know, you can't do that on a cooked vegan diet unless, or on a cooked diet unless you're taking some kind of stimulant, right? Unless you're doing a lot of sugar, candy, caffeine, or actual drugs, cocaine, you know, methamphetamine. That'll give you that kind of energy, okay? But needless to say, I don't want to do any of that. It brings up a point about energy and drugs. Now, I have certainly more contact with methamphetamine users than I'd like to have, you know, through my work. And after being, you know, after encountering this for some time, after giving it some thought, you know, I'm pretty well convinced that most drug addiction, other than the emotional factor, whatever it is that makes certain people need to take drugs to suppress their emotions, right? The other factor in there is energy, okay? And I don't care how bad your childhood was, or, you know, whatever it is you encountered. The fact is that you're eating a standard American diet all your life. You don't have the energy to deal with those emotions. You don't have the energy to deal with life. And that's why people become addicted to drugs. And that's why caffeine consumption is normalized, right? Because people just don't have the energy to deal with what life has to offer. And I really think that's a major reason why people do drugs, especially methamphetamine. If you look at the effects, people will stay up for days at a time on that stuff, like 3 or 4 days. They won't sleep, right? And this somehow is euphoric to them, right? Well, they're feeling this energy high, right? Which essentially is probably very similar to the energy high that I feel on low-fat raw vegan. So I'm thinking, really, fundamentally, drug addiction is an energy problem. You know, people can't get the energy to get themselves out of sticky situations, to avoid things in their life that are dragging them down, to deal with their own emotions that they acquired when they were children, and because of their upbringing or whatever. So I thought I would just add that comment, because energy is one of the biggest reasons why I'm maintaining this diet. Now, when I first started out and became a vegetarian, I was pretty down and out. I had just gotten a divorce. I was really unhappy. I wasn't doing what I wanted to do. I wasn't getting anywhere in the art world. I wasn't getting anywhere in the music world, and I was having to work these schlep jobs, and I was really pretty unhappy. I was pretty down and out, and my attitude was pretty bad at that point. So when I got into being a vegetarian, I thought, okay, you know, at some point, this is going to change my attitude. It's going to be uplifting to me. I'm going to change my whole attitude and discover ways to make myself happy, discover ways to be successful as an artist and a musician, discover ways to have a great relationship, right? This is what sort of what I was thinking at that time. And as I went along, I became a vegetarian, then I became a high-fat raw. I thought, first of all, if I go to raw food, that's going to do it. My attitude's going to change. Everything's going to change. I'm going to feel, just like David Wolf or whatever, right? And so I did the low-fat raw vegan. I was really convinced of that, and that's why I stuck with it for 15 years. And I never went over that attitude, point of view, whatever you want to look, outlook on life. I never made it over the hump. But I was always convinced that diet would get me there, would change my attitude, would change my outlook on life, and make me a happier person. Well, sure enough, when I was well into low-fat raw vegan, that did happen. Okay, so, from the inception of that idea that food could change your attitude, it took me 20 years to get to where I wanted to be with my outlook on life, my psychology, my psychological makeup, my attitude. And fortunately for you, I can tell you right now that low-fat raw vegan will do that for you. And the peripheral aspects of it, which are, getting your life organized and exercising and having a lot of physical activity. Okay, it will do that for you. And another thing I want to add right then and there is this important idea of what you take on. Now, I used to read, at that time when I was feeling down and out, I started reading self-improvement books. One author of which was Tony Robbins, who's, I forget what you call him, life coach. He's a life coach. And one thing that stood out after I read all his books and tried his method and stuff was that the idea that you should take on more, okay? That you shouldn't hesitate to add activities, projects, whatever, to your already established routine or, your plate, And this really stuck with me. Although at that time I did not have the energy to do that. But now that I have the energy to do that, I take on really as much as I think is possible, right? So like right now, I'm not in just one band, I'm in 3 bands, right? So so I make it a habit of taking things on, right? I wanted to get a BA in art. And so I went back to the university and I wound up working part-time and taking a full load at the university and maintaining my, my 80-10-10 diet and all this kind of stuff. So I just keep taking things on. And the interesting effect of that psychologically is it just totally reinforces your faith and belief in a low-fat raw vegan diet. Because as you take these things on and you discover that you can handle them and that you can put out the energy to complete them, to make them successful, to achieve your goals, as you do that, it reinforces your commitment to being a low-fat raw vegan, so that when you're confronted with cooked food that has these wonderful aromas and blah, 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 you just turn your nose up at it because you know that it's gonna compromise your ability to accomplish what you want to accomplish in your life, to live the life that you want to live. So that's an interesting side effect, and I would encourage people to do that. If something comes up, if an opportunity comes up that looks like it's going to be a stretch on your energy level or your time commitment, maybe I don't have enough time to do that, or maybe I shouldn't do that. It's being I'm overcommitting myself. I recommend just going for it. Okay, if you do overcommit, it's not going to have that big of an effect, and you can back out at some point. right? Like last summer, I committed to acting in the Shakespearean drama, and if you have ever done drama, man, it's a lot of hours. It's a huge commitment. You got to be there for rehearsals all the time, right? And you do performance after performance. Like it was Thursday through Sunday, we were doing performances. So half your day is gone Thursday through Sunday. In addition to working 40 hours a week, in addition to doing exercise, in addition to preparing food. So, and I found it was totally exhilarating. I was so glad that I made that commitment. And I did have reservations about it, but I wanted the experience of being a Shakespearean actor. And I am just tremendously glad that I did that. It was a great, great time. And I'm going to continue that. So this coming summer, I'll try to get into the next Shakespearean production that happens with the Hilo community players. So in this how and why, I'm maintaining this diet, I want to go into, basically, it's probably going to be the last. Oh, there's a couple of things. But first of all, I want to get into the deeper reasons. And so I've already covered the attitude aspect, all right, which I now call a fruititude. So I encourage everybody to get a fruititude. You replace your attitude with a fruititude. Anyways, and this idea of taking things on, because it leverages you to stay low-fat, raw vegan. And if you're only into it for a year or two and you don't have it wired, you're still going to have a lot of temptations and a lot of emotions and stuff that are going to pull you back to cooked food. But if you start taking on things, you're leveraging, I guess that's the right word, you're leveraging yourself to remain low-fat, raw vegan and get it wired so that you're getting the best results. And that also goes along with, it's tremendously supportive of you making, accomplishing what you want to accomplish in your life, of reaching your goals, of handling your everyday routines, of taking on more activities, of being successful. So low-fat, raw vegan is tremendously supportive of that, right? So if you have strong goals that you really want to do in your life, a level of success that you want to get to, you need to do the 80-10-10 diet. Another aspect of that, a deeper reason for being involved in 80-10-10, low-fat, raw vegan, is the idea that you're going to keep what you have. When I used to work out in gyms, I don't do it anymore, for various reasons. But anyways, I would hear people say, well, I just want to keep what I have, which is a perfectly valid reason. And I do. I want to keep what I have. And right now, I've got very high energy. I'm very physically fit. My body looks like it looks the same as when I was 20 years old, basically, except for the gray hair and a few wrinkles here and there. Physically, I look exactly like I looked when I was 20 years old, right? And I want to stay there till I'm 120, okay? So that's another deeper reason why I maintain this diet, because I want to keep what I have. Which brings me around to, since we're talking physical, it brings me around to athletics. 80-10-10, I used to make the comment to people that 80-10-10 was driven by athletics, and I still believe that. But I'm not going to use the term athletics. I'm going to use the term physical activity, because athletics implies that you're like a professional athlete, that you have to go out and you have to run 27-mile marathons, and you have to do all this kind of stuff, or you got to play, professional football. That's what athletics means to me, right? But so I'm going to use the term physical performance, okay? So The one thing about physical performance in 80-10-10 is that physical performance illustrates you better than any other aspect in your life the benefits of 80-10-10. Because if you're eating cooked food right now and you stop and you're exercising, right? And you stop eating that cooked food and you go raw for 3 or 4 days, you're going to notice this tremendous rise in your capacity to do physical activity, right? So this in and of itself is another reinforcement of you going raw if you are still eating cooked food, right? And it's just, there's no other aspect of your existence that shines out like strenuous physical activity to illustrate the tremendous benefits of 80-10-10, this tremendous energy that you have, this tremendous ability to recover quickly. Like the other day when I did a 30-mile bike ride and rehearsed for 5 hours and got up with 4 hours of sleep and took a 3-hour bus ride. The next day, yes, I could feel it, but it was not enough to actually modify anything I had planned for that day, right? So I wasn't laying in bed recuperating all day. I was doing my normal stuff that I do the next day on Tuesdays. And so I was recovering way quicker than I would have if I was eating a standard American diet or cooked vegan food. So that's another reinforcement, the whole idea of recovery. So I wanted to get that one out there. Now I'm going to move on to another reason, a really fundamental reason. It's actually a political reason why I do 80-10-10 and why I maintain this diet and why I'm never going back. And that is the whole idea of what's called the herding culture. So I don't know if you're familiar with Will Tuttle, but he's a lifetime cooked vegan, actually. He's a cooked vegan, lifetime cooked vegan, very prominent. He's written several books, got a great attitude, and he wrote a book, I forget the name of it, but he puts forth this idea of the herding culture, And this was tremendously inspirational to me because I thought, I immediately started looking around me to see evidence of this. Now, the idea is that, I better check the time. Hold on just a minute. 9:30, so I'm going to have to leave. I got to go run and get on a bus. But I'll take this up when I get over to the Kona side. I'm going to get into this idea of the herding culture and how important it is in terms of a motivation for me to be doing 80-10-10 raw. And I'm also going to, that'll be the last part of this video. I'll have to attach it. It was great talking with everybody, putting forth my experience, and I hope it's helping you out. Please, if you like the video, do like, subscribe, comment, and share. Not necessarily in that order. Anyways, I'll check back with you when I get on the Kona side.